The cleanup continues. I'm meteorologist Elisa Raffa live here in Mooresville. Coming up next, I'm going to detail the latest tornado report that tracks 37 miles of damage. We'll talk about that coming up next.
So I think it was pretty close. If it wasn't a tornado, it was pretty darn close to it.
Yeah, that neighbor in Troutman's hunch was right. Today, we now know more about an EF1 tornado that did touch down in the northwest, toppling trees and sending hundreds of neighbors into the dark. Meteorologist Elisa Raffa joins us live from that area this afternoon.
And Elisa, this tornado's path was long. How long are we talking?
37 miles. I kept reading that report over and over last night because that is incredibly long for a tornado path, especially one that's a EF1. It had 110-mile-per-hour winds at its peak, which is close to EF2 strength, but still, for a tornado that's still considered on the weaker side, I mean, the widespread damage and the path length is just remarkable. We're here in Mooresville, where at the time it came through as an EF0, and I don't know if you could see the still power crews behind us that are working on dangling power lines, massive trees that are snapped all over still, about several hundred people still without power at last check. But we have been all over the area looking at this damage. I mean, the number of snapped, uprooted, and toppled trees is numerous. It took the National Weather Service hours to go through all of the damage. They made multiple stops yesterday in northern Mecklenburg County where that EF0 was first confirmed, and then they spent some time in Davidson and then ended in that EF1 tornado path at about 8, 9 o'clock last night. It took them that long to go through 37 miles worth of damage. So if we take a look at, I want to show you a map of that tornado path. Again, 37 miles is just incredible. EF1 on the ground from about 4:40 Monday evening until almost 5:30. with that peak wind at 110 miles per hour stretching from Catawba County through Iredell and into Rowan County. So some of the headlines out of this, it crossed 3 counties, Catawba, Iredell, and Rowan, and it had that path of 37 miles. Andrew Brightman was able to help me go back through some of that historical records. That should be the longest tornado path since 2011. So again, very rare we don't get tornadoes that on the ground for that long. Typically, depending on the strength of the tornado, that average path is about 3 miles. And again, the stronger the tornado, the longer that path can usually be. So for an EF1, again, especially surprising. Touching down in Conover with the peak winds near Highway 10 at 110 miles per hour. And this whole thing was embedded in a massive line of storms that packed 80-mile-per-hour winds. This is what the radar looked like at the time. And you can see where it's kind of bending. That's that snap of the 70, 80-mile-per-hour straight line winds. And then you had a tornado embedded in that. So that's what also made this survey particularly difficult for the National Weather Service, because you have multiple trees down all over the place for a multitude of reasons, and you could see that there in the tornado path. That tornado wasn't isolated on its own. It had multiple things going on. So again, on that EF scale, when you have that EF0, that's when you have some of that minor damage to roofs, siding, some power lines and trees, right? That EF1, now we were at the top scale of that EF1 at 110 miles per hour. Poles, trees, all uprooted and toppled, and we definitely saw a lot of that. Here's Trisha Palmer. She's with the National Weather Service explaining what they look for when they try to assess this damage.
We need to see the direction of tree fall. Was it splatted out? Was it in a what we call divergent direction? Was it convergent? Were they falling over each other? Were some of them falling backwards, which is what we'll see more often in a tornado?
Now, the reason why the National Weather Service comes out to decide, because tree down, right? And when it's on your house, it's a bad day no matter what got it down, right? But they need to come out here to understand what did it for their historical context, for those records. So we do know how rare or common these tornadoes might be, and so we can help protect you and keep you safe going into the next time. Now, Tara, we still have communities here in the dark, still cleaning up the pieces. There are tree limbs down all over the place. Looks like the power crews even moved up to get some of those power lines ready to go. And we've got another threat going into tomorrow. What are your biggest concerns with that?
Again, damaging straight line wind is possible. It looks like we could see that squall line moving through now at this.
Monday, a tornado touched down in multiple neighborhoods in Mecklenburg County. Fast forward to today, the National Weather Service confirms a second tornado hit the county. Meteorologist and climate specialist Elisa Raffa returned to the Mooresville area where one community was hit hard.
Driving through Mooresville here, you can see all the power trucks lined up still trying to get power on in some of these communities. A couple of hundred people at last check still without power. You can see from massive trees like this that are just down, snapped, uprooted, power lines hanging and dangling, crews working tirelessly to get the lights back on. Now, late last night, the National Weather Service was able to confirm that a tornado did come through this area in Mooresville. It took them hours to sift through the damage because of the countless trees that were snapped, uprooted from both straight line winds and that tornado. That tornado was EF1 in strength. It touched down near Conover in the Catawba County area, and it was on the ground for 37 miles, ran through Iredell County, and finally lifted in Rowan County. Now, here in Mooresville, it did briefly weaken to an EF0 tornado with those winds probably closer to around 80 miles per hour, but at its peak, it had 110 mile per hour winds, which is almost an EF2 strain. What I think is probably the most remarkable about this tornado is the time that it was on the ground, 37 miles, covering 3 counties. And what was so difficult for the Weather Service in trying to determine what kind of winds kind of knocked down, uprooted all these trees was it was also embedded with straight line winds. We had 80 mile per hour straight line winds in parts of Catawba County as well. Here's Trisha Palmer with the National Weather Service describing how they study the trees to determine what took them down.
We need to see the direction of tree fall. Was it splatted out? Was it in a what we call divergent direction? Was it convergent? Were they falling over each other? Were some of them falling backwards, which is what we'll see more often in a tornado?
And it was a lot of damage to comb through. I mean, when you have 37 miles of that path length, the average tornado path length is about 3 miles. The stronger the tornado, usually the longer the path length can be. But for a very high-end EF1, 37 miles is incredibly long. Hopefully it doesn't take that much longer to clean this up and get the lights back on. Again, many still in the dark here in Mooresville. Now reporting in Mooresville, meteorologist Elisa Raffa, Queen City News.
Elisa, thank you. Let's talk about those first